My parents gave my sister a $13,000 luxury cruise. They gave me a $2 lottery ticket instead. That cheap gift won me $100 million. By the time they found out, I already had 79 missed calls from them. Hey Reddit, my name is Rachel. I'm 31 years old, and the most expensive Christmas gift my parents ever gave me cost exactly $2. It wasn't a necklace. It wasn't a sweater. It wasn't even a gift card. It was a lottery ticket. They laughed when I opened it. 3 weeks later, that little piece of paper changed my life forever. But before you assume this is just another story about money, let me tell you something. The lottery wasn't the best thing that happened to me. It simply revealed who my family had been all along. I grew up with one younger sister, Madison. If you asked my parents, they'd insist they loved us equally. If you watched how they treated us, you'd know that wasn't true. Madison always seemed to receive whatever she wanted. A new phone, designer clothes, private tennis lessons. When she turned 16, my parents surprised her with a nearly new SUV. Mom hugged her and said, "You deserve the very best." When I turned 16 2 years earlier, I'd received a handwritten card with $50 inside. Dad smiled proudly. "This should teach you the value of money." I thanked them anyway. That's what I always did. Whenever relatives noticed the difference, Mom always had the same explanation. Rachel is independent. Madison needs more encouragement. It became the excuse for everything. When Madison failed her first year of college, my parents paid for her to start over. When I graduated with honors, they skipped the ceremony because Madison had a tennis tournament the same weekend. Dad promised we'd celebrate later. We never did. After college, I became a registered nurse at a children's hospital in Minneapolis. The work wasn't glamorous. The shifts were long. Some days, I came home emotionally exhausted. But every child who smiled after getting better reminded me why I'd chosen that career. I wasn't rich, but I loved what I did. Madison took a different path. She became a lifestyle influencer. To my surprise, she actually built a decent following online. She earned enough to travel frequently and work with small brands. My parents treated every sponsored vacation like she'd won an Olympic medal. Meanwhile, when I worked a double shift during flu season, Mom would simply say, "That's nice." Eventually, I stopped expecting praise. I learned something important. When people only celebrate one version of success, you have to decide whether their approval is worth chasing. I decided it wasn't. The only person who always made me feel appreciated was my grandmother. She lived in a small apartment across town and never missed calling me after a difficult shift. "Are you taking care of yourself?" She'd always ask. Sometimes we'd talk for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Unlike everyone else, she asked about me before talking about anyone else. The Christmas everything changed started like every other one. My parents hosted dinner. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey. The fireplace crackled. Christmas music played softly in the background. For a few hours, everything actually felt peaceful, until it was time to exchange gifts. Madison went first. Dad rolled a large envelope across the coffee table. She opened it. Her eyes widened immediately. Oh my gosh. Inside were 2 tickets for a luxury Caribbean cruise. 7 nights, ocean view suite. Flights included. Mom clapped excitedly. "Merry Christmas." Madison threw her arms around them. "This is amazing." Dad smiled proudly. It cost a little over $13,000. Several relatives gasped. My aunt whispered, "That's an incredible gift." I smiled. Good for her. Honestly, if my parents wanted to spend that kind of money on Madison, that was their choice. I didn't feel jealous. At least, not until Mom handed me my present. It was a tiny envelope, no bigger than a greeting card. I opened it. Inside was a single lottery ticket. I looked up. Mom laughed. "Who knows? You might get lucky." A few relatives chuckled politely. Dad grinned. "If you win, don't forget your old parents." The room laughed. I forced a smile. "Thank you." That was all I said. Grandma quietly watched the entire exchange. As everyone admired Madison's cruise itinerary, she leaned over and whispered, "You deserved better than that." I squeezed her hand. "It's okay." She looked at me for a long moment. "No, sweetheart, it isn't." That sentence stayed with me long after Christmas dinner ended. A week later, life returned to normal. I worked several overnight shifts, helped my grandmother take down her Christmas decorations, completely forgot about the lottery ticket. Then one Friday evening, while cleaning out my purse after work, I found it tucked inside a side pocket. I almost threw it away. Then I remembered Dad's joke. "You might get lucky." I smiled to myself. Why not? The convenience store was only 5 minutes away. I handed the ticket to the cashier. "Can you check this for me?" She scanned it. Instead of handing it back, she looked at the screen. then scanned it again. Her expression changed. "I'm going to need my manager." I frowned. "Did I win something?" She smiled nervously. "I can't tell you here." A man wearing a store manager's badge walked over. He scanned the ticket himself, then looked directly at me. "Ma'am, I think you need to contact the state lottery office." My stomach tightened. "Why?" He smiled carefully. "This ticket can't be paid at a retail location." I laughed awkwardly. "So, what did I win?" He shook his head. "I'm sorry. I legally can't confirm the amount." "But," he looked down at the ticket again. "You'll definitely want to keep it somewhere safe." I walked back to my car completely confused. My hands were shaking. Surely, it couldn't be anything significant. Maybe $50,000. Maybe $100,000 if I was unbelievably lucky. When I got home, I searched the drawing results online. I compared the numbers once, then again, then a third time. I stopped breathing. Every number matched, every single one. I checked the jackpot amount, then checked it again because I was convinced I'd read it wrong. $100 million. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain refused to believe it. I sat on my living room floor for almost an hour. The ticket rested on my coffee table while I simply stared at it. Finally, I called the state lottery office. The representative congratulated me and explained the verification process. She also gave me one piece of advice before ending the call. Don't tell anyone until you've spoken with an attorney and a financial advisor. I promised I wouldn't. The following week became a blur. Lawyers, financial planners, security advice, meetings, paperwork, everyone repeated the same thing. Move slowly. Protect your privacy. Don't make emotional decisions. I followed every piece of advice. Not even Grandma knew. I wanted to tell her more than anyone, but I decided to wait until everything was officially confirmed. Then, something happened that I never expected. A local news station somehow learned that the winning ticket had been sold at the convenience store near my neighborhood. They didn't know my name, but reporters started asking questions around town. Within 48 hours, someone recognized me leaving the lottery office. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. By the time I looked at the screen, I had dozens of missed calls. Most of them were from people who hadn't bothered to check on me in months, including my parents. Sometimes, people don't change when you come into money. They simply stop hiding who they've always been. As my phone filled with missed calls, I already knew every conversation was about to begin with the same question. Not "how are you?" but "can we talk?" I stared at my phone for almost 5 minutes. 79 missed calls, 32 text messages, 9 voicemails. Every single one had arrived within the last 2 hours. My parents, my sister, 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, an uncle who forgot my birthday every year, even family friends I'd barely met. Not one of them had called the week before, or the month before, or on my birthday. But somehow, they had all found time now. I set the phone face down on the table. My financial advisor had given me one piece of advice I couldn't stop thinking about. The first people who suddenly need your money are often the same people who never valued your time. So I waited. 3 days later, the lottery commission officially verified the ticket. After taxes, the amount was far smaller than the advertised jackpot. Still, it was more money than I could ever spend in one lifetime. The first thing I did wasn't buy a mansion. It wasn't buying a sports car. It wasn't quitting my job. Instead, I quietly paid off my student loans. Then I paid off my small townhouse. I created investment accounts with the help of professionals, and I established a charitable foundation dedicated to helping families whose children were receiving long-term treatment at the very hospital where I worked. That decision felt right. Money had changed my circumstances. I wanted it to change someone else's too. Only after everything was legally finalized did I finally call my grandmother. She answered on the second ring. "Sweetheart, I have something to tell you." After a long silence, she laughed through tears. "I knew it." "You knew?" "I knew something wonderful had happened. Not because of the news, because it's the first time in years you've sounded completely at peace." That conversation meant more to me than any congratulations I'd receive afterward. The next morning, I finally returned my parents' call. Mom answered before the first ring finished. "Rachel, there you are. We've been so worried." I almost smiled. "Worried? You've called me 79 times. We thought something terrible had happened." I stayed quiet. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting. "So, is it true? What have you heard? That you won the lottery?" I looked out my living room window. "Yes." The line went completely silent. Then Dad grabbed the phone. "How much?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "Congratulations." Just, "How much?" I'd rather not discuss that. He laughed awkwardly. "Come on, we're family." I remembered Christmas morning, Madison opening her cruise tickets, me holding a $2 lottery ticket while everyone laughed. Then Dad's voice. If you win, don't forget your old parents. I answered calmly. I haven't forgotten anything. Dad cleared his throat. We'd like you to come over. For what? So we can celebrate. Celebrate? An interesting choice of words. I agreed, mostly because I wanted one honest conversation before deciding what our relationship would look like going forward. That Sunday, I walked into my parents' house. Everything looked exactly the same, except the way everyone looked at me. My cousins suddenly wanted to hear about my job. My aunt hugged me for nearly a minute. My uncle proudly introduced me to neighbors, as though we'd always been close. It was exhausting. After dinner, Dad finally spoke. We've been thinking. I nodded. You've always been responsible with money. I try to be. So, he slid a folder across the table. I looked down. Inside were brochures. Luxury homes, investment properties, business opportunities. Mom smiled. We thought it would make sense if you helped Madison expand her brand. I looked at my sister. She avoided my eyes. Dad continued. She could become a national influencer with the right investment. And we thought. He hesitated. $5 million would be a reasonable start. The room became completely silent. $5 million. He said it as casually as someone asking to borrow a lawnmower. I slowly closed the folder. No, Dad blinked. No. Mom frowned. But you have plenty. I do. So why wouldn't you help your sister? I looked at Madison, then back at my parents. Because helping someone and financing their lifestyle aren't the same thing. Dad's expression hardened. So you're just keeping it all for yourself? I smiled gently. No, I've already donated millions. Mom looked shocked. To strangers, to children, families, scholarship programs, the hospital where I work. Dad shook his head. So people you don't even know matter more than your own family. I took a slow breath. No, they're simply asking for help. They're not demanding it. Silence. Madison suddenly spoke for the first time all evening. Mom, Dad, stop. Everyone turned toward her. She looked at me. I don't want her money. Mom stared. What are you talking about? Madison looked down at her hands. Rachel spent her whole life getting less than I did. I know that now. I just never admitted it. She looked back at me. I'm sorry. The room became very quiet. I should have said something years ago. I didn't. And I'm sorry. I believed her. Not because of the words. Because of how hard they seemed for her to say. Dad sighed heavily. We only wanted both our daughters to succeed. I shook my head. No, you wanted one daughter to succeed. You expected the other one to understand. No one argued. Because no one could. Before leaving, I handed my grandmother a small envelope. She frowned. What's this? Open it later. That evening, she called me crying. Inside was the deed showing that I'd quietly paid off the remaining mortgage on her apartment. There were no cameras, no social media posts, no announcement, just one sentence written on a card. Thank you for always making me feel like enough.